don't need much, just my family and you. Be there for me and I'll be there for you. And I promise you, we'll find a way out when our backs against the wall. How much is more important than true friends in this land? You may move on and go your own way, but I'm telling you that's alright. Because I know when I need you, you're just a call away. And I know you'll do the right thing and drop everything to be with me. Whoa, whoa, my friends. Whoa, whoa, my friends.
I had been listening to hardcore and punk for years, but I had never gone to a show. And then my first show I went to was Sick of It All at City Gardens in Trenton, New Jersey. And we started a band like immediately. When we left that show, I was on a high that I think I'm still on right now. And it was just changed my life, you know what I mean? And I said, that's what I want to do. That's exactly what I want to do.
We were originally in a band called Legion of Decency. And we played the very first hardcore show in Philadelphia at the Love Hall. And from there, just went crazy.
I was like, because I was into graffiti at the time, and anything else that was insane for a kid who was 11 years old or 12 years old or however old I was. And I was like, you mean to tell me I can jump on the stage, run around like a hyperactive little kid, and jump on people's heads, and that's okay?
And it was like kind of like this, yo, let's just fuck this whole place up vibe. And I really responded to the fuck everything aspect of like, we'll jump off the stage, we'll kick your ass, you know, fuck you, you bouncer.
The shows that we would go to, you know, have one every 3 months, and that time there was maybe 3 at one weekend. So you would have, you know, all these people you'd see every once in a blue moon, and you'd start to check them out and recognize them and say hello and talk, and then eventually people form into bands.
We all decided to move to Philadelphia. And that was kind of like the beginning. That was, you know, we all ended up living in this house, 1335 on Robin Street, and that was pretty much like the start for me.
Didn't even know a scene existed until I went to a show, and I walked in, looked around, and it was kind of like, wow, you know, I'm not the only weirdo like this. There's hundreds more, and it was just like that kind of like sense of community, I guess, more than anything.
We went down to see Exodus, and Sick of It All opened up, and a local band down there called Forthright from the Lehigh Valley, like a straight edge hardcore band, opened up, and we never really seen something like that at this point.
I went to my first show at IQ Records, and that was that.
Even if you weren't totally fitting in, you just felt like you had a place to go and you were doing something.
My cousin brought me to a punk show, and I just liked the whole vibe of it and just how everyone danced and people just wore what they want. No one gave a shit.
It started with an old caddy playground gig. A couple of friends of mine dragged me out there, and of all bands playing was Suicidal Tendencies.
What drew me to the PA hardcore scene was we went up to see, believe it or not, I think early VOD and this band Crutch.
My friends took me to the show, and it was just like all these people from school, and the shit was right in my fucking face. And it was just like, I just remember seeing Dysphoria, and I was like, this is fucking, like, this is what I've been looking for.
That was me going into CI Records, and Tony Pointless was working, and he handed me a flyer, and he's like, I live in this place, Stalag 13 in West Philly. Here are the shows I'm doing. Check it out.
Everyone pile on! Last song! I will bow to no one!
the only problem with PA was it wasn't a label or anything like that to support the scene.
Right.
So that's why it didn't take off like it did in the other cities.
Right, we're kind of like, nobody recognizes us, you know, we're like just off the radar, you know.
We had these fucking legendary bands to us that never really seemed to maybe break out of the scene. And it's an absolute bum rap because, you know, Pennsylvania has produced and continues to produce some of the best bands in the world.
Kid Dynamite and Ink and Dagger and All Else Failed. I don't know, we always seem to get the shit.
Got passed over a lot. Yeah, definitely.
There was always a lot of good bands out of PA that just kind of went unnoticed.
You know, New York City, Boston, they don't think about the in-between.
You would think we're right in the middle of all that. That there'd be some kind of, hey, whoa, hey, what's going on?
You know, you start getting around the Harrisburg area, the Philly area, Scranton, Wilkes-Barre. I mean, there's so many different cities that Pennsylvania has that gets overlooked because somebody mentions Sick of It All and Madball, they're like, yeah.
It gets overlooked because for a long time it was super dead here. I went through a million great shows in Philly that were to see the best bands that were around at the time. Be lucky if there was 150 people at those shows.
You had the comps coming out back in the day, New York hardcore the way it is, New York hardcore where the wild things are. And granted, much respect to that, that was all great shit. But I mean, that's where a lot of the focus was. But there was a lot of good stuff coming out outside of New York that kind of flew under the radar.
Thing is, those guys all had sounds, but that's also meant they were all doing the same fucking shit. You know? So, I mean, informed sources sound nothing like autistic behavior. Autistic behavior sound nothing like wide-eye.
People might hear, say, the Stickmen, and if they're not into that style, they might think that's Philly. Or if they hear Wide-Eye or Ruin, or they'll think, oh, that's all they do. And Philly you had a lot of like more artsy stuff, industrial stuff, hardcore, old school punk. There's a lot of.
That's what made it interesting to be a part of that scene back then, because you go to a Futurama or whatever, and there'd be all these different acts.
I will argue that our scene has been consistently, moving and growing more than Boston, more than New York. I mean, we cover a lot more ground. It's hundreds of miles. Our scene. I'm just talking about cities, but our scene's popping up new bands every day.
Society's a memories of relative weakness. Take away the suckers and the battles is remains. Freedom has no bounds.
By the time I got here in '82, there was definitely a scene going on. There was only a few of us. There may have been 50 kids, if that. You were either in the autistic behavior camp, which was like the skateboarder, fucking pot smoking, totally having fun, or you were into the, sadistic exploits trip, which was like, leather jackets and studs.
If there was one thing about Philadelphia, there was a sort of respected difference among bands.
Philly had a weird sound. Philly's sound was everything. It was a mismatch of everything.
Pure Hell back in the 70s, the Stickmen, the Reds.
The Stickmen were the first original, just kind of like out there.
Wide-Eye is still the best fucking thing ever come out of Philadelphia as far as I'm concerned.
Wide-Eye was just one of those bands. It was pure aggression.
Wide-Eye is the one that got me, because it was angry. And when I heard that shit, when I heard this fucking I was like, that's what I like.
I saw Decontrol, and that was after the first year Terror show.
Bands like McRad and like all the guys from Skate Corps.
FOD put out the first record at 12, 14, whatever they were. They're playing tonight. 30 years.
musically, Ruin was probably the best band in Philly.
Their ideology, their mentality, and they could just destroy a room. It was one of those bands that if you never witnessed them live, you could never understand just how amazing they were. I think they were the first hardcore band in Spin magazine.
They were fucking really trippy, and they were into that whole weird Buddhism, Yam Yoho Renge Kyo thing. They were good, but creepy as fuck.
They had stage presence, something different. Their music was fucking something different. They just were on some whole other thing. They were years ahead of their time.
Yeah, there were certain DJs that really championed the scene back then. That Eddie Hacksaw being one of them.
Ruin killed. Yeah.
Michelle Polisi.
We played live at XPN and KDU.
Listening to WKDU, which is a local, they were pretty much the strongest force of radio when it came to punk and hardcore.
Howard, Steve I, Lenny Bandock, and they brought so many different shows to Philly.
Lenny Crunch, he put on tons of shows.
David Carroll. And David Carroll had Artemis and the Hot Club.
Chuck Meehan, just the shows he put on, the effort the man put out.
Chuck's just the finest. He's really he's the guy who he was the glue for many, many years of everything.
Nancy Exploit, she really kicked off a lot of shit. First female promoter in the city.
The Elk Center, which Nancy from Sadistic Exploits, she was their manager. Punk Fest is what they called it.
Carol Schutzbank was another person who did a lot to. She put on more of the shows that were kind of like at Philadelphia College of Arts, University of Pennsylvania.
Love Hall and East Side Club and all these other different places started to pop up.
Love Hall was a little dirty place, didn't even have bathrooms. Everybody pissed in the alley behind it.
All the clubs on South Street started to develop. Grendel's Lair right where the Gap is.
There was Omnis, which was at 9th and Walnut.
The Kennel Club was short-lived. You had Club Pizzazz, and there was a Y that we used to put shows on there too.
Starlight Ballroom was up in Kensington, but they were doing more like big name acts.
It was SOA's playing and fucking.
But wasn't that when Henry did the double ticket that night? To my recollection, that was the first time Henry actually took the mic and sang for a little while.
The Philly punks would go there, you kind of knew when you went up there, be very cool with the locals. You just can't walk into Kensington and with an attitude or screw with anybody.
It was the DC skinheads versus the Philly punk rock Mohicans versus the Kenzos.
DC people were just like fucking people up, and all these Kensington people came in with baseball bats, and it's fucking nuts, man.
Once a Kensington guy got caught in the crossfire, the Washington kids jumped this Kensington guy, and this Kensington guy left the show and just was like, "You motherfuckers are dead."
Then they had the good judgment to do another show to book the Dead Kennedys there.
I was standing out having a cigarette in front of the place, and suddenly this guy threw a bomb into the crowd waiting out front, and it landed real close to me.
We just went boom, exploded on the ground, and people got hurt. One girl had her ankle shredded up.
They were putting nails and shit in jars and attaching M80s to them. Those were the bombs that they were throwing at us.
There's dudes coming in swinging baseball bats, and people were screaming and running and stuff. And I vividly remember Jello being up on stage.
Okay. Also, if I forget when the set is over to say this, after we're done playing, everybody's staying here until somebody figures there's a way out without any heads getting bashed. Everything to the fight.
fucking Dysphoria was on another level. Like, there was people my age, like Inkling, VCU, you know, fucking Minor Times, even like Leavenworth, The Name, CDC, like those type bands, it was great. But the bands in front of us, Dysphoria especially, fucking set the bar, dude.
Dysphoria was the one that really did it for me. I mean, I was at every one of their shows. Todd, Kevin, you know, Judd, all those guys are such great dudes, you know. So it's just, for me, they would be the PA band that sticks out for me.
Dysphoria, I think, as a band, musician-wise, all 5 of them, including Judd, I mean, they were just good musicians, and it just seemed like they could have, with some of the crap that I've heard, I think they should have been on a higher level.
The guys in Shine, you know, Inkling was around, 13 PFP, all those guys, and we seemed to play with them a lot. We really did a lot of shows together.
And Mitch, like, from 13 PFP, that dude, like, hooked us up so good, like, with Double Down Records and stuff like that. Like, he really helped us out. He helped the scene out a lot for Lansdale. He was I feel he was a major supporter of the Lansdale scene.
Chris Spear especially was just constantly booking out shows and would book out Dysphoria all the time.
The way we did shows was we have a couple really good bands from Boston. We bring them down. You know, like the guys from Death Patrol's Honor. It was crazy because we would book a show and all of a sudden out of nowhere, like, we expect 100 kids and 300 kids show up.
There was a place called Jumpers that is now in Lansdale, which it got torn down and turned into an Acme. But that place had shows. Dysphoria played there a bunch, Chine, PFP, all those bands. And that place closed, and then they started doing shows at the Knights of Columbus in Lansdale at 8th and Kenilworth, and then 5th and Maple at Celebration, St. Marie's.
Dysphoria had always sort of been like the staple band from the scene. Chine, of course, as well. Then there were bands like Problematics, which ex-members of Insane Angel, PPG. And that's really when PFP were doing most of our shows. Those were the bands that were big. And Blue Collar Underworld was, I guess, another band that was playing out a lot.
There was a band, Soul Grind, that was doing a lot of shows in and around Lansdale. We were hooked up and friends with them from the beginning.
Before Hope Without Reason, definitely. There's a couple old Lansdale bands like Soul Grind.
There was the Fiesta Motor Lodge, if you want to go way back. That's really where a lot of the
That's where Violent Society got their start.
Yeah. Philadelphia has been really great to us just in general. Like, I mean, some of the best shows we've ever done. But, like, really, like, further out in the state was kind of onto us. Like the first shows I remember playing where I'm like, yo, I think people are starting to get us. We're out like Lansdale and like Phoenixville and stuff like that.
My whole life is playing music and revolves around punk rock and hardcore, and it all started in Knights of Columbus Hall in Lansdale. Shine actually broke up right about the time I started going to shows for the first time, and so all I would ever hear was like the legend of Shine.
I remember the first time we had a show in Lansdale, it was like a big deal to actually play right down the street instead of, you know, driving an hour or two just to play a show.
If there's any Pennsylvania hardcore bands that might have impacted my life, I'd probably say, oddly enough, Leavenworth was one of like the big things that happened to me, because Dave Heck is one of my closest friends. He took me on tour down to Florida with him and some guys from CDC, and it was probably the most fun I've ever had in my entire life.
The Minor Times, you know, you can't say enough about how much that band put into the performance, how much they put into the songwriting, how underappreciated they were. I think they could have been an international fucking sensation.
Nobody knew what the fuck to do to the Minor Times. They had no idea, dude. I remember I'd be out there like fucking dancing it up, like, yeah, you can dance to this part right here. And everybody else was just like, what is this? You know? But they fucking went hard, man.
There's this other scene out there, and it's a whole different crop of bands, a whole different people. And you move a little further, you know, and you're going to end up with like the Pittsburgh scene. You're going to end up with the Erie scene. You're like, you know, like Scranton. Erie scene. Yeah, the Erie scene. Ooh, it's an Erie scene.
PA Hardcore Brotherhood, coming at you, respect it and fear it, motherfucker! I got the sense and I don't understand. When I want it was, then fucked up the plan. There's nothing smothered with loyalty, with respect, but that stuff doesn't mean shit anymore. Just touching and leaving behind. I guess it was a sign of the time.
In 1995, after I graduated high school, I moved up to Erie, PA, and got heavily involved in that scene.
It was actually kind of a blessing because we were
equal distance from Cleveland, Pittsburgh, and Buffalo.
Started having Erie picking up shows, you know, bands like Brothers Keeper, Disciple, Shockwave, Neverfall. The whole 814 area is starting to, you know, really come alive.
I think some of the more notable bands that really spawned like early hardcore music in Erie would be like Downpour.
Yeah. Last Man Standing.
Last Man Standing. Lost.
Out of Hand.
Out of
Yeah.
Hand and Lost.
Yeah, Lost.
Something to Prove. Something to Prove. I mean, Something to Prove is probably like the one that really defined hardcore music in Erie.
Brothers Keeper is huge. Brothers Keeper kind of put Erie on the map.
We are Brothers Keeper from Erie, Pennsylvania!
They're the first band that everyone thinks of when they think of Erie hardcore.
Neverfall, Contradiction, Aggression, Shockwave, Disciple, Brothers Keeper, Red Sky. There's all types of bands. Erie was a powerhouse.
I'd say some of the big heavy hitters in Erie in the early days, and this was before I even lived up there, would have been Mike Ski.
Sometimes it's crazy, but the dude did a lot, you know, for like really like establishing
Put Erie on the map.
I worked really hard. I don't at all take credit for anything like that because it was like a really like, it was really like a true example of like a community of people.
What I can tell you is Mike laid a lot of the groundwork along with other people like Iggy.
Our friend Iggy, Ben Frazier, Rob Whipple.
Dudes like Larry Weaver and Matt Zanzala were the dudes that were first setting up the punk rock shows. And if it really wasn't for those dudes, and they were the first ones to book at the Continental, you know, Erie definitely wouldn't have had the same scene.
EMS is the owner of Ink Assassins Tattoos in Erie. He ran Surprise Attack Records, which was just an indie record label. Put out a lot of local bands.
Shows in the when I started going early on for me, you know, there'd be a rap group, there'd be a heavy metal group, there'd be a hardcore group, and everybody was just trying to take advantage of the fact that our city was big but not that big, and really tried to work together to make a scene.
Everybody got along. That's probably the thing that I like the most about the Erie hardcore scene.
You had no retreat, pretty much. Build upon frustration, gut wrench.
Our style was a little more brutal than what they did, but the kids always respected us up there.
8 of the best years of my life. Just traveling around with all of my friends, jumping in a van, going around, jumping on planes, going around. We would play anywhere and everywhere that we could.
We were the first as the hardcore wise, but there was other bands. There was like Long Fuse Trigger, there was Blinder.
Out of Hand. Probably the first band around, awesome bunch of dudes. Pretty much paved the way for everybody else.
I moved to Pittsburgh in like early 90s and kind of became a part of the hardcore scene then. Back then it was like my band Endless, a band called Gut Wrench, a band called Section 315.
Gut Wrench has been around forever. There was a Time Bomb way back in the day.
Half-Life came from there, and then Submachine and Osrotten. You know, Pittsburgh was definitely a weird hardcore scene. Like, you could go, like Earth Crisis would play down there, and there'd be 300-400 kids.
Pittsburgh kids were a little different. They sort of followed their own favorite bands, and then when those bands either got big or stopped playing, then they sort of stopped going to shows.
Battered Citizens turned into Time Bomb, and then once those guys broke up, and then hardcore was getting a little bit more political oriented. There was bands like Passover, Chapter.
Slowpoke.
Slowpoke. Oh yeah,
Slowpoke was awesome.
Yeah, Slowpoke was amazing.
Club Lager, Millville Industrial Theater was huge. Saw some great shows there.
It was literally an industrial park that the roof leaked in the winter. They'd literally have torpedo heaters and tarps, like plastic tarps up to try to keep it somewhat warm.
Spot in Lawrenceville called Cool Pepper's Hot House. Club Graffiti.
Graffiti was one of the best clubs. For shows, used to see Strife and Crown of Thorns and a lot of the New York bands out there.
In February of '89 was the first show at the Continental Ballroom.
That was a great place. It was just a kind of in the middle of a neighborhood, and was the old ballroom that kind of had a setup for like a jazz band with a couple levels for the stage and everything. It had like a tinfoil ceiling with mirrors all behind it, and would just sweat and drip down on everybody as the bands would play throughout the night.
You'd have different spots in Oakland, like the Attic, like different CD warehouses there for a while. In Latrobe, there's a place called the Rally Alley. There was an old car wash. It just, I remember it was like a fucking oven in there. Like every show was like 1,000 degrees. You'd have kids passing out from dancing.
The Boys and Girls Club, and every time we went to a show, the attendance doubled.
After Continental, everything kind of moved to a place called IQ Records, which was right on State Street, kind of downtown Erie, and once again the shows were huge. Brothers Keeper and Disciple and Shockwave were pulling in a lot of kids, and the vibe was awesome.
Erie, I always end up at the same punk house where it's like some fucking crack den. I don't know how we always end up there. And we were on tour. Last time I was in Erie, I was on tour with Fang, and we ended up there. So, you know, that was a fucking special something going on. A lot of vomit going on in that place.
There was Mr. Roboto was a place.
Roboto was in a living room in a really crappy neighborhood in Pittsburgh.
Fort Hall, that was a big one. That was big. They did their first hardcore show in 1998, if I remember right. It was Extinction, Disembodied, Brothers Keeper, and Another Victim. And that show, there was over 600 people there.
At the end of the Subculture, the walls were just obliterated. Everything was obliterated. I had to put up plywood the whole way around the place. And at the end, when I was done with the place, to fix it back up so the guy didn't sue me, it literally took me, no joke, 40 hours, a full 40-hour week by myself to get it back in condition.
Things would get too crazy and they'd shut it down, and then you'd have to find another place to play, and that became more and more difficult, which may have also led to the failure of the scene to kind of keep going.
Built Upon Frustration, that CEO Resurrection is like one of the craziest records ever. It was so good, and I feel like that's a band that no one knows about outside of, like, you know, Pittsburgh area.
Consistently, like, stupidly heavy, and I think for us in Pittsburgh, we were always kind of sort of upset that they never got bigger, because we wanted people to appreciate what they had to offer, and I know everybody secretly wishes for a Built Upon Frustration reunion.
The mid to late 90s, when Brothers Keeper was really like on fire, there'd be 400 or 500 kids every show.
Every show.
Easy, you know? That's, I mean, for a town that's less than 100,000 people, that's a pretty big accomplishment.
Shockwave, I guess I was at their last show, if that would be considered their last show. I always appreciated a band that would just like get ridiculous for the sake of just getting ridiculous, like they really didn't give a shit.
Every show was an event, especially in Erie, a hometown show. For some reason, Shockwave picked that area.
Kids would dress up as robots and Santa Claus and all kinds of crazy barbarian, making their own weapons and just battling when they played. And
traveling around, people would always ask us questions about them, tell us that they heard rumors that they just sat in their front yard, lifted weights, and listened to gangster rap. We were like, yeah, maybe. We don't really know. We don't know a whole lot about them. Generally, the communication was very sparse. They would get a hold of us if they needed shows set up or whatever.
And the best thing about Shockwave is, you know, that was like the biggest joke that freaking succeeded ever in the whole world, you know. They were all from like different bands and traded their instruments up and sang about Transformers.
Shockwave took over the world. Shockwave cannot be categorized. Shockwave will never die. We don't care about Pennsylvania. Our goal is the world. This is our home base. Erie just houses us. We've never broken up, we'll never break up. We'll play when we feel like it. End of story.
people don't understand is that if you were from Central Pennsylvania in the 90s, you drove for shows because there was no shows in Central Pennsylvania. So we drove our asses off just to see every single band every weekend that we could go and see because there was nothing else to do. You could either go skateboarding, drink, party, or go see a hardcore show.
Mostly we had to find fire halls, YMCAs, any place that would let us do a show. We did have Little Joe's, which was a bar in Harrisburg, and occasionally they'd let us do maybe a Sunday afternoon show, something like that. I think we had the Necros and Suicidal Tendencies played there once on their very first tour with Corrosion of Conformity.
Catasauqua is really like, they're the grandfathers of punk rock around here. If you talk about punk rock around here, you cannot bring up Catasauqua.
Catasauqua and Allentown, actually, I mean, a lot of bands played there back in the day. Like Misfits played, I think, Catasauqua Playground.
Clearfield was a real good spot. You'd play a show like in like a fucking, it's like a storage shed out in the middle of like some park, and there'd be over 100 kids pile in. You know, you had Not Without Resistance from Clearfield. They did real well for a while.
Clearfield, Pennsylvania, Altoona, Pennsylvania, Williamsport, Pennsylvania, because it all just from that way came this way, and from the east came that way, it met in the middle, and it was like boom.
PA to me has always kind of been too, though, like places like Altoona and Lewistown, where, and I mean, we've been to some pretty weird towns out in the middle of nowhere where there's kids that are super stoked though.
The cool thing about where we grew up in Jim Thorpe, it was between everything. Like Wilkes-Barre, Scranton is the same distance as going to Allentown, or almost the same distance as going to Reading. So we were really centralized as far as all that goes.
They were doing shows at the Arts House basement, which was kind of like where all the art students lived. There was a little record store called Proteges, and then there was a used clothing store called Classic Rags.
Didn't we play once in the basement of Crack Rock? We did, in fact. Yeah. Oh, that was a good time. Yeah, I remember we were all excited to play Crack Rock. We're like, oh, this is going to be so cool. And we get there, like, no, you guys go downstairs. That's where you're playing. Oh.
Oliver J's, Wally's, and Allentown-ish, the 4Gs. It was all Allentown. And then the Airport Music Hall. And the Unisound out in Reading.
Unisound was this straight up underground club that, you know, it was, for some reason it had this bad hype about it, this bad vibe. 89, 90, 91, 92. It was a spot where at the time New York City was not able to have too many hardcore shows because of the violence out there. So a lot of these bands were rotating through good old Reading, Pennsylvania, and the shows that we were getting over there and the people that were traveling from out of town, they were tremendous shows. They were just absolute fucking mayhem.
We started driving 3 hours to come up to this place called Unisound, and it was insane. Like it was, there was no charge, but it was, it was like mandatory donation, and there was, no drugs, no alcohol, no racism. It was like a really solid place. There was a skate ramp in the back. They had 2 stages, and every show that I went to there had minimum 600 people. It was just booming here. This was like regular stop for all the bands like, Sick of It All, Biohazard, Sheer Terror, Shelter, 108. It was a really sketchy place. The owner didn't have any insurance on the place. It was like broken down, like looked like something out of like Judgment Night. And you could feel the floor move. They were, it was so disheveled.
Allentown we started going to, which was good and bad. I mean, back then it was really bad as far as like violence and skinheads, and like it was really, really bad. I mean, And unfortunately, they got the best of it, and everything closed down, and they couldn't do shows there anymore. They can only do like small DIY shows.
We couldn't do shows at the Fire Hall anymore. The Wire, which was a coffee shop in New Cumberland, had closed down, and we sort of were like, hey, we need a space. It's time. Let's try and find something. So we found a space in Lemoyne, in a strip mall. We were there for about 3 years till they decided they did not want us there anymore and basically got evicted. We paid the bills. I just didn't want a punk rock venue in a strip mall.
Old Championship and that strip mall was fantastic because for me growing up, I never found anything like that.
So we moved half a mile away to another location down by the river, which was known as Championship. That's probably how most people knew it. It was an old train yard from a steam engine from the turn of the century that was a storage facility that we converted into a venue. Good space, could hold about 400 people cap, and then had a record store in the front. That's really where I feel like we sort of put a mark on the scene of Harrisburg. We were able to do a lot of stuff. Wisdom and Chains will tell you played a lot there. Did the Youngblood 10-year showcase there, which was Striking Distance Reunion, which is a huge show. We were able to get like Convergence Ceremony and definitely doing bigger hardcore shows, packing that place out.
It seemed like it kind of went in spurts, though. There'd be nothing happening in Harrisburg, there'd be something in Lancaster. Nothing in Lancaster, maybe Reading.
It was just a highway of bands coming through Pennsylvania all the time. I mean, I started out seeing The Exploited at Airport Music Hall, and then MDC at Oliver J's, Agnostic Front at Oliver J's, Youth of Today at Oliver J's, and then there was Wally's, it was Murphy's Law, Gorilla Biscuits, Uniform Choice, G.G. Allen. And it was just amazing. And it's like, this is what I want to do.
I was in a band starting in 1983 at State College called Positive 8, which, looking back, you would have classified as pretty much of a generic hardcore band. Hardcore band strictly influenced by other hardcore bands.
Joy Friedman is a person who probably deserves kudos for putting stuff together back then in Lancaster. York occasionally would have some stuff. There was a band called Second Crisis from York, probably one of the first hardcore bands from that area. And, there were a lot of shows down there from time to time. 999 used to play at the Caddy Shack. They used to bring all kinds of touring acts like the Pork Duke. So. There was Combat Control, the New Left, and Friction, and the Late Teens. AWOL would have been the first really hardcore punk rock band around here, and then they turned into Syndicate.
Bands like Frontside, bands like Always Uprising, bands like No Compromise.
There was a band called Stand Your Ground. I go to a lot of shows in York. There's a band called Bond Society from Philly who used to come down a lot. A band called the MFC from York.
Forthright, I mean, they were a straight edge hardcore band in the vein of they were kind of like Gorilla Biscuits, stuff like that.
You live in a place like Philly or Pittsburgh, you've got 3-4 shows a week to choose from, so you might miss out on a lot that way. But around here, growing up, I know we appreciated each and every show there was. We'd go early, try and see every band start to finish.
This is it. This is where it all started. My first hardcore show, LS Skaterama, 1990.
When you have a small town like Wilkes-Barre, but somehow the whole rest of hardcore is following their lead, that's awesome.
If you want to have a scene, you got to make a scene. So that's what we did. And what we originally started doing was renting out fire halls in the White Mills area, right? Something like
Tafton,
that.
yeah, then we had Tafton.
You would do a show, literally, wherever you could, do a show without the cops shutting it down.
It was weird. So you had Scranton, and then you had the Poconos, and you had Wilkes-Barre, and then pretty much the music and skateboarding brought everybody together.
I remember seeing, I think, One Shot Deal in '92 at the Columbia Firehouse in Edwardsville, and that's around when Flux and Fabulous Disaster were still on flyers.
There's just so many cool little places, like Kingston. We'd play Edwardsville Fire Hall.
One of the first people to put on shows was a guy named Mark Kresge. He put on shows at LNS Skaterama in Nanticoke. and one of the first bands that he brought in from out of town was Bouncing Souls. So it was Bouncing Souls, Wilson's Wackos, and Positive Energy.
Like, there'd be a ton of us fucking, like, back in the day, I had this fucking huge-ass Impala. We'd have, like, 3 dudes in the front, like, 5 in the back seat, two cats be in the trunk if they really wanted to go. And we go up to Spanky's or, like, CC's and shit like that.
You big cities are extremely spoiled. You have 3 shows a week, sometimes more.
I like when there's 3 a month because it keeps you hungry. Like, all right, 3 or 4 shows a week, you're gonna get smaller turnouts because it's like, I'll just go to the next show.
When you lived in Scranton, Wilkes-Barre, or Erie, or Lansdale, you went to every show, no matter who was playing.
Everybody from around here, we're like a geographic anomaly. We're 2 hours from everywhere.
We're kind of a good microcosm of that in that we got every band that ever toured, any hardcore band has always played here.
First show at the VFW in Newfoundland, and I remember drawing up the flyer for it while I was in art class in high school and like running to try to get copies before we got in trouble.
My fondest memory of the Pancake House was like the toilet backing up, and that carpet was like soaking wet and had mushrooms growing out of it.
AFA Art Gallery had a handful of shows in Scranton. Proof Rocks in Scranton had shows.
The Zoo. We were just talking about that on the way down. God, we love that place.
Gallagher's.
The old staircase.
It's the old staircase. The roller rink down in Kingston.
All the little one-offs. We had Westside Park. We had shows just randomly at, Redano's.
First Blood for Blood show in Pennsylvania was at Westside Park in Nanticoke. Our friend Dan Mills was booking shows at the time, and I think they came down here and played for like $100.
Well, right now, we're starting to do Redwood. It used to be
Backstage.
That
was our first show.
The brother of one of my guitar players in RSB. Guy had a pool hall under, it's basically the basement of James. We had a big shopping center. They had a pool hall down there. It wasn't too large, but he said he wanted to do concerts.
We played Earth Crisis' first show out of New York State, I think was at the Factory, and I remember it had that fence in front of the stage.
I remember the first time VOD played here, they were supposed to play with Life of Agony at CC's. Life of Agony canceled, and VOD headlined the show. And you may have even been at that show. And kids never heard of VOD before, but they just went fucking nuts.
The best thing I remember about Pennsylvania is CC's. It was probably our first out-of-state show ever. It was the best. Explosive shows, unlimited fucking beer.
Dan Ingolson brought the first hardcore show to CC's. CC's is like the CBGBs of Pennsylvania.
So many of us grew up at CC's, and Vince was like a weird stepdad, I guess you could call him, like in some sort of way, because he really took care of us. He looked out for us. Like, I don't know why he cared about us, but he did.
I just paid half the sewer bill from CC's only about 2 years ago.
Oh, way.
The bill was like $19,500. I never made a payment. Finally, they came after me.
Vince, he knew everyone's first name and their band name. So he called you like Eddie Denial or Tony Denial,
Yeah.
So we ended up taking it on.
I remember like calling up the owner, and he would like never remember us. Like, he'd be like, God forbid, are you hardcore? You hardcore? He would never remember us. The thing that was cool about it is he would you could cold call him and he would book you.
I think I mostly spent my time at CC's because
do it.
I was underage, so I had to go where I was allowed.
By far, CC's is my favorite era of hardcore, period.
CC's was real important. It was constant shows.
Bigwig was on tour with a band, Blunt from California, and Another Snowy Story, and we showed up at CC's, nobody there, the show was canceled, and Vince is like, I don't want you guys driving home, sleep overnight. So we slept overnight at CC's, and me, Tom Petty from Bigwig, and Shannon Sharp of Wisdom and Chains all slept on a floor under a blanket, the 3 of us. Kind of like that, I don't care, fucking freezing, because Vince didn't want to turn on the goddamn heat.
CC's was like a meeting ground. Like, you would go there, and honestly, I know I said it in my strength for a reason. You would go there, and when you pulled up, everybody would chant your name. Like, if there was 300 people there, you probably knew 250 of them.
The owner, Vince, was a character. His old dad would sit by the door, ornery old dude.
Old man CC's is what we would call him. He would call everybody a chiseler. And if he thought you were trying to
sneak in, you were a chiseler. But it came to the point where you would hand him money and he would still call you a chiseler. Like, everybody was a chiseler to this guy.
My father's the doorman collecting the money, and I can hear this ruckus at the door, you know, and I gotta go out and see what's going on. So I go to the door. I said, Dad, what's going on? He goes, well, these guys are trying to get in. I said, Dad, that's the band. I said, you gotta let them in. They're the band. They're the main band. They're trying to sneak in. I said, no. I said, they're cool. And I remember Vinny saying to me, because my name is Vince also, he called me Vince. He said, Vinny, where's your dad from? Is he from Brooklyn? I go, no. He said, he's from Old Forge. He goes, oh, we thought he was from Brooklyn. The way he was acting, he was trying to throw us out.
CC's was phenomenal. I saw some of the best shows ever there. Thousands of shows. 25 to Life, Pit Boss, Side Over was one of the big bands up there. Option. There was this band Final Stand. They were really cool. Bands like No Retreat, Strength for a Reason started practicing there back in the day.
The 2 Memorial Day festivals, actually there were 3 of them. I got to do those. That was an opportunity to do something like this. Start at noon, just go all the way into the night, and have a show where basically you have like about 7 or 8 headliners.
At the time we were rolling pretty good. We had a lot of bands, and like you say, we were like the hardcore club of Northeast of Pennsylvania, and they were saying at the time. So I guess we did make an impact. You don't realize it until later on, more and more, and I'm glad to see that's still going on.
Spanky's short-lived spot, had some good shows. I tried to really get in there and make it work, but the owner was like, he was a little nutty. He was kind of like this mob-type dude.
Dragged our balls through glass at Spanky's, that's where we learned. Yeah. We learned the ropes. We met tons of people there.
There was an instance where while Life of Agony was playing, one of the breakers or one of the fuses went, so I had to. It would have literally taken me 45 seconds to run around the building and go through the back way, but their bouncer that they brought with them decided to just take the door off the hinges with his muscle.
It's still giving them a problem. So fuck it, we'll tear the place down for courtesy. This one's called Bad Seed. Come on, hey Joe, fuck him. Just come. Don't even talk, fuck him.
A friend of ours knocked down the door to the control room to flip the switch back on.
And obviously that's when the damage starts.
Our singer said at one point, I want, just to get the crowd excited, I want to see you guys tear this roof down.
Last one of the fucking night, I want to see the ceiling fucking come down. Let's see this fucking show!
And they took it literally, and they started punching the ceiling and getting on people's shoulders and punching the ceiling. And
that was it, man. He said, bring this fucking place down, and everything came down, man. I never saw anything like it in my life.
Look up. I never fixed it.
This is the damage? We still get people coming up to us after shows or at the merch booth and things like that with pieces of the ceiling from the Pancake House to sign. And it's just one of those shows that you can never forget.
I'm like, oh man. I was like, this is, like...
That's hardcore.
Yeah, I was like, that is hardcore, and I'm not insured for it.
Did you get that fucking ceiling torn down? Sure. All right.
Wisdom in Chains for me is the epitome of what Pennsylvania hardcore is all about, because they're just a fucking amazing band.
They're the first PA band that I really kind of became like obsessed with, because it kind of takes a lot of my old punk rock roots and melds it with hardcore.
Wisdom in Chains, the scene anywhere in the world, Pennsylvania's always been brothers. They're great people. It's the best place to be.
Feeble was cool because back then everybody was trying to be heavier than each other, tougher than each other, and Feeble came out being more melodic punk rock element, not scared to show that side.
The first real hardcore show I was at, Strength for a Reason was the first band that played, and that was just, it blew me away just seeing people like actually climbing up and fucking grabbing the microphone and interacting with the band.
no cooler band, and I'm not just trying to say there's no cooler band to see than Strength for a Reason. Like, every show that they played, it was fucking insane, and like, being that young and seeing that was like, really changed everything.
Throughout the years of Crutch, we would pick up different guys, different bands, and then that's kind of how we made some relationships with different areas, different bands.
Dogs on Chains? Yeah, it wasn't too long. No, a year before. Might have been a year. Then we changed the band members and we took another name on Mesh.
So What was one of the first bands up there that I was exposed to.
I mean, we all know Option was a great band.
They were, man.
Sideover was a great band. Solus was a great band, and Solus was different than, you know what I mean? And
I was like at Gita's band, Bedford too.
Bedford?
They were a great little melodic.
Burial Ground, come on. We all loved Burial Ground. Come on!
Option really did a lot for our scene. Option really, you know, Steve and the guys in Option did, and Jamie and Burial Ground, those two bands for me were really, they were really like the hardcore. They were our area. Other bands like other Pennsylvania bands, Weston was another big band that I really think had a huge impact on our area. And shaping our scene and shaping.
Well, there's a lot of crossover
what kind of
between, like,
music,
the punk stuff
right? What
and
kind of
the
music?
hardcore stuff.
Yeah, because back in the day, like you didn't go to a show that was you know, you didn't go to a metal show or a hardcore show. You went to a band where you would see Burial Ground play with like Copper, you know, or you know, at a friggin' distance.
Fabulous Disaster.
Right.
What you do? We're gonna take your title as one that chosen few. That's right! I was there! Where were you? Did you think?
Cabbage Collective are one of the most important things to know about Philadelphia, because without the Cabbage Collective they would have never had the church, and without the church we wouldn't be where we are now. You know, the history that's coming out of that room, that's the East Coast Gilman Street. You know, every big band is, you know, played there or been there at some point.
When we moved down there, and oh man, I remember getting rides down to University Arts shows and going to the Troc back in the day, getting rides down there, and I've always loved that scene. Philadelphia back then, you know, was a really tough scene. People loved you or they freaking hated you, you know, and they let you know it.
At the time, the fact that it was scary, that there was violence, that things were going down, that was just fun for me. That was like part of why it was exciting.
We all ended up moving to this house, 314 North 19th Street. And out of that house, you know, we had Suburban Fanzine, we had Ink and Dagger, we had Crud as a Cult, we had Contention Records, iBook shows, Don Book shows. So this one house kind of spawned a lot of the stuff that went on in the city.
There's a lot of great musicians, a lot of great bands, but music fandom in Philadelphia and surrounding areas is pretty intense. And you don't have that in a lot of cities. You figure that out really fast if you go on tour.
Philadelphia was the first city that showed us real love. I mean, even before our hometown.
You know, the Revival had a couple shows here and there every once in a while. Then came, you know, the Khyber, you know, was there for a long time. J.C. Dobbs was there for a long time. That was where they had the Sunday matinees, you know. I mean, upstairs at Nick's, which is gone.
You put 6 or 8 kids in a house that has a big basement that you can stand up in, and they're going to have bands play there.
Stalag 13, Tony Pointless, ran that for many years.
Me and, Bull from Cabins Collective and Andrew Martini, Kill the Man of Questions and Limp Wrist, Andrew lived around the corner, and me and him, we really were the ones that started pushing for Stalag to be more of a venue rather than a house.
The first era of Stalag, where everybody's a little bit more punk, the crustier element come. Just a couple skinheads would show up to some punk shows. There would be fights, people would pull hammers out, and it was cool at that time to not fight with the squatters, but to fight against the Nazis.
And then you started having a bunch of gentrification with some of the white punk kids who only got it there because it was cheap and they could do shows.
That time in West Philly, particularly when there were these warehouse shows, it was really unbeatable. There was something exciting happening there.
Stalag was great. It started out as just a squat punk house that did shows, and it was a lot of stuff like Converge would play there all the time, Drop Dead would play there all the time, Burn the Priest before they were Lamb of God would play there all the time. They even talk about it still to this day when you see them go play. They're like, who's here when we played at Stalag?
It was weird because at home we could play to like 25 people, and then we go to Stalag and it'd be like 300-400 people crammed in there. Just crazy.
When a mic went out or something weird happened, I ended up trying to fix it, and gradually I was there so often that they sort of came to me to do the sound, and I'm like, there's not really much to do there other than monitor the board a little bit. So
there was a gentleman named Mikey Brosnan who actually, to my knowledge, started Stalag 13, or definitely was one of the first tenants to live there. If it wasn't for him, a lot of Philadelphia hardcore I don't think would be here.
Stalag 13 was one of the first places we played. Kill Time.
Every band in the 90s played there. I got to see a lot of shows there. Eventually shut down, then everything moved over to Kill Time. A lot of great shows there. I still to this day don't know how they got that giant head out of the building.
We call it Palenka Park, Podunka Village. So Bob Meadows would book us up there, and he did a lot for us as well.
God forbid, Shai Hulud played there, Converge played there, Hope Conspiracy, Saves the Day, Voice That's Fire.
.218 was basically this. Have you ever seen the movie The Gate, where the thing opens in the backyard and it just sucks you in and you can't get out of it and you kind of have to fight the demons that are there? It was kind of like that.
Harry Cats. Holy fuck. Harry Cats. That was the coolest place ever, because you know what? You could kick the ceiling tiles down.
You remember,
could punch the wall.
Remember the one dude, the tall motherfucker from Baltimore? He was like boxing.
Skinny Steve.
Yeah, he
lost the top of his finger.
Bangin' Babies. That's probably my favorite Pennsylvania band of all time.
Watching all the time to see the light. Watching for me and some of you might. Sit around and watch TV is what you do. Girls say your tunnel is one of children to you. That's right!
Two of the first records I bought were Ink and Dagger, Drive the 7-inch wooden stake to my Philadelphia heart. So that put Philly on the map for me. And then I Hate You.
Dare to Defy. That's another band that played a lot of good shows.
This Day Forward, it was Jared Rome, even Lifesick Life.
We weren't like, all right, forget all that stuff, let's be a hardcore band. We were like, well, let's just be this band that's just everything. It's just whatever,
Then you listen to 7-inch and it's really not, I don't even know where we got heavy, because that 7-inch isn't heavy.
Yeah, it's heavy as shit. You want to talk any more shit?
All else failed, if you're going to go with chaotic hardcore, they're the most angry, pissed off band that has ever fucking existed, in my opinion.
They live it and bleed it, and there isn't many bands out there that'll ever be even close to that level.
For them not to be huge was beyond my realm of comprehension. To see them live, see the kids singing along to not just every word, but the samples, to know where it all came in, and when that band played, the energy in the room changed totally.
As soon as they came around, it was like, what the fuck is that? You know, they used to have two singers that would beat each other up on stage, so you know I'm all over that.
Every time I saw them, it was visceral. It was powerful.
Absolutely fucking
terrifying.
They beat themselves into oblivion.
Oh yeah, and even they're one of those bands that every time
it was scary back when I first started seeing them when I didn't know them, and I was like, "Fuck, these dudes are nuts." There's two singers and they're punching each other in the face while they play. What's going on here?
I remember seeing them, a free show at Stalag, and it was Kill the Man of Questions, and it was them, and they played as the six-piece, as the infamous six-piece, and they went into the first song, and I've never fucking seen anything like that. Still to this day, I've never seen that. That changed my life. That made me the frontman. Luke Muir made me the singer I am today. Like, just that intensity and passion.
I think we're at a point in our lives where it's easier to be content with what you have, as opposed to when you're like full-time active band. You're always pushing and trying to get to a next level and getting pissed off at where you're at and being like, why are we on this stupid show, or why are we on this fucking town, or whatever. Like now it's like, well, this is tonight. Like this is it. This is the night I'm going to be thinking about for the next 6 months.
Turmoil. And they're a great fucking band, you know. And they're one of those bands. Like to me, they're a band's band. Like I don't think they got the recognition that they ever deserved. They're phenomenal.
Everybody was like, "Oh, you can't fuck with Turmoil. Like that's good shit right there." Yeah, that was one of our favorite bands. Definitely an influence for us too, back in the day.
John Gould, hands down to me, is one of the best singers in hardcore ever.
One of the turning points for me was seeing Turmoil. I mean, you know, those guys are like so incredibly heavy. You know, I'd never heard anything like that before I saw those guys for the first time, and they just blew me the fuck out of the water.
Turmoil, you know, was a band that you know, probably at that time, probably my favorite band that was purely a hardcore band. You know, you could, you know, I'm definitely a metal guy, you know, and the Process of was probably my favorite hardcore album of all time.
Yeah, Philly is. There's no other place to this date like where you will get all that type of music and everybody's appreciative of it. I mean, I live out west now, and there's no scene whatsoever.
Our band never was really in the hardcore scene. We were like hardcore kids that played like weird metal.
I feel like Starkweather was probably the biggest one out of Philly that was underrated. I don't know how they're not like the band right now. How are they not like Lamb of God right now? You know, it's beyond me. They started. Remy's the first person I ever saw like right in the, you know, in the middle of like a, you know, almost like a death metal sounding song, just break down and start singing. And it, you know, and the way he did it, it's better than anyone is ever going to do it.
Starkweather would be a perfect example. Way fucking underrated.
Starkweather was always a band that I always felt they were, I don't know, like just totally not, like nobody cared about them that beyond this area. And I'm like, man, these guys are fucking awesome. Like, especially for the time and everything. I always thought they were like a lot before their time, you know?
When you say underrated, you're not speaking about Starkweather because you can't rate something that never wanted to be rated.
Without Starkweather, you don't have Converge, you don't have Dillinger, you don't have most of the bands that have these infamous names now.
I had Starkweather actually come out maybe 6 or 8 or 10 years, like when the new metal and the hardcore kind of kicked in. They probably would have been one of the biggest bands.
They have like this die-hard fan base, but just like a lot of bands, it seems like they're very regional. All else failed, same thing. It's like you can't you take them out of Philly, nobody.
Our output's infrequent, you know. We do it on our time. We do it with our money first, and then if somebody wants to buy it from us, fine.
Fireworks, fucking, I think, lobsters and mice or some shit like that. You know what I mean? Fucking barbed wire, throwing chairs in the middle of the room. There's fucking fireworks and fucking, I was just like, I was absolutely out of my mind. I just wanted to find a way out of the joint, honestly, you know what I mean? But hey, listen, whatever floats your boat.
Being scared was part of the reason you liked it. You know, you weren't friends with everybody when you walked in the door.
The original Satanic Rave, I showed up too late. I saw the cops beating on my friends. I saw fireworks going off and being shot at cops.
The kids in the crowd take it to such a level, man. There's just weapons, and to watch it, it's awesome to watch. But if I were standing in the middle of that, I'm a big, ugly motherfucker, but I don't want to get hit with a bat.
Everybody got all of it. I was just like, here we go again. All right, it's going to get broken tonight. Somebody's going to get hurt, and it's going to be someone we know, and they're just it's going to be their own fault. And somebody just threw a disco ball at Steve Bush, and whatever.
Blood, fireworks, naked dudes. I was hit in the back of the head with a recliner. Not a chair, a recliner.
The Bad Luck 13 shows. You know, a lot of times the Bad Luck 13 shows were never the band. It was always someone in the club being like, that's it, I'm going to fucking stop you, motherfucker. And it's like, how can you stop 150 people? What by what means? You're going to throw a net on everybody? Like, what are you going to do?
Bad Luck 13, fucking maniacs. Them guys, I remember when they had to try to go on tour, so they couldn't, like, you know, set fire to the club or, you know, firebomb the fucking parking lot or whatever.
All those guys are awesome dudes. You know, they're just fucking nuts. All this, you know, Jay's crazy, but he's like the nicest dude.
The way we got on Hellfest is I used to play cards with one of the dudes who ran it, and he lost a bet, so Bad Luck headlined the side stage. But the lineup of that the way that went down, I knew something. You knew it was on. It was fucking, you know, it was 25 to Life, Marauder, Bad Luck on the Hot Topic stage. You know, at the end, you know, it was bound to get nuts. You know.
As far as I'm concerned, being in a hardcore punk band is all about letting out aggression, and I was always fine with it. I did not want to be in a band where people are standing around with their thumbs up their asses, you know, just got their backpacks on and just fucking standing there like wallflower. I want people going freaking nuts, and you know what? A fight's gonna happen once in a while, so be it.
Minor Threat was playing a show over in Camden, and it was in a rough neighborhood. Me and Zeke and a bunch of the guys that skated in Philly, we actually took the subway over there. The guy was like, don't do that, because you guys are going to get chased. And we literally got chased by dudes, like 12 dudes throwing like bricks.
I see Ian kind of like flip over the front of the hood and then go down on the ground but catch himself and then look at me and go, did you see that?
We were in the van, and I remember the whole thing like shifting. It was like an earthquake, you know, and he's like, what the fuck, you know? And it turned out that we had gotten rear-ended.
A person in the car literally swerved and tried to either hit the van or hit him, and he was on, I guess, in or on it, or jumped on the van and fell off and smacked the back of his head.
He seemed to be okay, and he went to play the show. He actually played the show. You know, that's how hardcore it was. You get hit by a car, and the next thing you're up on stage still playing the show.
The Exploited were traveling the country in like a camper. And it was just like people just fucking beating the shit out of this thing. And you know, the whole time, and the guy here is interviewing me about Pagan Baby stuff, and then he's peeking down here going, what do you think of that? And I went, you know, man, that fucking blows, man.
You know, you put bands on like Sacred Reich and Sepultura with Biohazard and Sick of It All and Napalm Death. You know, the audiences back then weren't exactly best buddies. You know, so you had a clash of the heavy metal world coming into the punk rock world.
Allentown, with all the Nazis, you little kids have no idea what it was like when we used to start going to with all the Nazi skinheads, because you were lucky, you had a shaved head. This guy always had hair, And it was
But
weird.
that didn't make me safe.
All I know is all the windows start getting broken into TLA, Ishka Bibbles, and they're all shutting down the fucking gates. Cops did not show up on South Street till 20 minutes later. 20 fucking minutes on South Street, Sunday afternoon.
You know, one of the pivotal moments when I used to go on tour, people would be like, oh, you're from Philadelphia. Yeah, is it true about the Get Up Kids fight?
The Get Up Kids show, where they got beat up. There was Suicide Machines. They got beat up. There's a lot of bands got beat up at the church.
Asian Brian decides that he's going to take Dee Snider's son and show him, you know, a thing or two about Philadelphia. I believe it ended with him, Dee Snider's son, actually being choked out with his own ponytail.
All these Nazi guys come out, and we're trying to kick him out of the club, and people are just following him around and stuff. You know, just basically, I don't know. I think they wanted to beat him up. They were just going to fight these Nazis, but for some reason we let them get to their car, and the dude pulls out a gun and just starts shooting in the air, and we all just fucking take off. We're like, what the fuck? But, you know, they were just trying to run Nazis out of the truck pretty much.
The scene that I was most involved in was just fucked up, almost like wrestling style. I mean, a whole confederacy of scum shit. We had Rancid Vat, fucking Double Penetration, Lime Cell.
When music was dangerous, it seemed. You know what I mean? Like, you didn't know if you were... I remember going to tons of shows, you know, like, knowing like there's gonna be some fucking shit breaking out here.
The violence, while it does ruin a lot, it helps us maintain what we are. It helps us maintain what we do. And, you know, yeah, I don't want to see any fights in any shows, but I also don't want to see a time where, you know, this thing becomes so big and it loses its identity. I think playing hardcore shows is kind of fucking weak, but I mean, sometimes you can't avoid it.
Why we've lost all the great venues that we once had because of fights.
When you're playing nothing but shows and you can't play because the venue's getting shut down before you even get a chance to load your equipment in, that's really stupid.
Fights generally come from kids who don't understand the scene or kids who are too caught up in things.
You know, the violence, we did our best to try and stop it if there was a fight. As many of us as possible would just try to jump in and stop it and be like, look, you know, we're not going to deal with this shit here. This isn't cool. You fuck up this club, we've got nowhere to have a show next month.
What I fucking hate is these people that just start fights with younger kids that just show up, that like obviously do not fit in, but I mean, they're like, oh, they're fucking nerds.
Yeah, you got long hair. It's just like weird pants. You don't get it yet, but you're at the show.
Yeah, they're trying to get it.
Yeah.
Like, what the fuck? Just okay, just drive them away before you even find out if they're really into it. Like, they haven't become a hardcore kid yet. Yeah, we get that you're a hardcore kid. Don't fucking ruin it for this kid who could find out about this. Could be like their fucking life.
You were a dork last year.
Some of the biggest hardcore bands, they will still to this day say it's some of their best shows that they ever had were in Pennsylvania. You know, it made its fucking mark.
You've got all those bands from Wilkes-Barre, you know, you've got Cold World, United Youth, Dead End Path, Stick Together, all those kinds of bands. Title Fight, who are killing it. I mean, absurdly so. And then, you know, if you like the sort of like more New York hardcore thing, you know, you've got Wisdom in Chains, who are phenomenal. Strength for a Reason is still playing, still doing awesome, still super tight and heavy. You've got all these crazy bands coming out. Blacklisted coming out of Philly.
We went to Russia for a weekend. We flew out on like a Friday and we got back on Monday or something, and it was crazy. It was just absolutely crazy that just happened.
My guys are like metal guys. I come from the punk scene. I come from the hardcore scene. That's what I grew up with, not metal.
We were down here all the time, you know. We played some of the universities, going to Philly and play shows at the Troc. So it was awesome, man. It's awesome now.
I've been involved with the Pennsylvania scene for a lot of years. I got Steelers tattoo on my neck. I mean, you know, Jesus Christ.
It's definitely on the map now, more than it was, you know, earlier. It's more recognized, I would say.
The PA scene is very tight, man. It's been the same faces since I started Fury 5 in 1994, you know what I mean? And it's awesome feeling, you know what I mean? And me, it's real special because I'm a BFL family member, you know what I mean? So, you know, brothers for life, you know, PA's is like my home, it's like my second home. If I could move out here, I'd be out here.
It's a friendship and a brotherhood. It's like something that I met people from when I was a kid. Kids that went to school with me my whole life could come over my house, and I would never even let them in my room by themselves. I can meet somebody through hardcore 5 times and let them stay at my house for a weekend when I'm not even at my house. It's just something that, it's just special, and like some people on the outside will never understand that.
I look back and I mean, these people were my family for a long time. They were the closest people I had to the world to me, next to my actual blood.
All these fucking frat boys, yuppies, jocks, yada yada yada, douchebags that are out there in this fucking world, and yeah, I'm talking to you, all you fucking douchebags. You don't see this at all. This level of camaraderie and brotherhood that we have all established.
But it was a vehicle just to express myself and an outlet for my frustration with everything, with the status quo.
If I didn't like discover hardcore and the scene, it really for many years it saved me from myself.
I think I was introduced to PA hardcore back in 2002 maybe, and due to that website I ended up actually meeting my husband, which I don't know if that's a thing to be proud of or not, but I did. And
it's something that's very deeply rooted and ingrained in me and my personality and my way of life and my ethics.
It shaped my whole life. I mean, I wouldn't be who I am today if it wasn't for hardcore.
It stops being what you're into and it sort of becomes what you are, if that makes sense, you know? It's not, you're not so much, oh, I'm into this, it's what you are after a certain amount of time.
I got to travel around in a van, see the world, and go to a city, and instead of seeing a tourist spot, I got to hang out with people. I got to go hang out in a bar in Prague, then go to a house party in Prague.
Going to hardcore shows and playing shows and having kids sing along and all that stuff you wrote was super highlight.
This is hardcore. It's pretty nuts how it's just escalated over the years.
We're the biggest hardcore fest in the country. I didn't think I was ever going to do that.
I'm happy that Philadelphia's stood its ground and stayed unique.
Philly's got the best hardcore scene in the world right now.
Love it, love Philly, and cannot thank you enough, Philadelphia, for what you've done for us.
This wasn't always a place that people wanted to visit. This wasn't always a place that people wanted to see shows from. This wasn't always a place that bands came from. Appreciate what you have. And, people in other scenes, just do what we did. Just keep going. Start bands, start teams, book shows, go to a fire hall and say, can I rent this for $100?
There is no fucking doubt in my mind that punk rock changed my life.
People may talk about New York hardcore and DC and Cali, but PA, straight up, much respect to all you guys out there, all you kids out there doing young bands, killing it right now.
Just come to Pennsylvania and go to shows. You'll understand when you actually see the shows.
Stay weird. I don't think you people can help it. I think it's something in the water or in the air or something. Nuclear power or Amish, I don't know. What's up with that Amish mafia shit? You people really gonna let that happen?
This is a mecca of hardcore, Other places have been a mecca of hardcore. Some places are for a minute and they fall off. Some places, are slow and steady, but this has always been a mecca for hardcore. This is what we built this shit here, you know what I mean? We cultivate it like farmers, you know what I mean? This is something that we love, and I've dedicated a huge portion of my life to making sure that we have a good reputation in Pennsylvania, that people want to come back and go to shows here, that we have quality bands that come from here, you know what I mean? And that I take a lot of pride in it, that, you know what I mean, certain bands that pop up from my area, that they're from my area, I take pride in that, and I try to promote them around the world, whenever I'm touring or traveling, I want to bring them with me, you know what I mean, in spirit and in name at least, just so that people know, yeah, that's one of ours, that band's one of ours, you know what I mean? Strength for Reason, yeah, that's us, Cold World, that's us, you know what I mean? Dead End Path, that's Pennsylvania. Where, you know what I mean? What do you want? Mushmouth, this is Pennsylvania hardcore, it's our brand, it's something that we take pride in.
We are the black and proud man, what's the thing to say? Man, what's the bill, got it everywhere to win. I just wanna say where the fuck I'm from. Try to be a cannon over such a day. Stand one still, that's time to end. I just wanna say where the fuck I'm from. But I don't think the mind on it, yo. Well, I represent the case of sight. I'm going to the ones in the south in the street. Thank you so much for listening. Take care of each other. If we hesitate, it might be too late, so let's go. We gotta go. Don't hesitate, reclaim your life, let's go. We gotta go. We got no time to spare.
To say that the Clubber Lang CD on record was paid for by a woman who used to date Steve Bush, and Bush used to shit on her chest in a bathtub. That happened.